If you hear mysterious noises and sounds, if you hear your name called when there's no one around, keep going, dear listener. This story is for you. I hope it will accomplish what I wrote it to do. In these words, you'll find all the tools you'll need so that when you're faced with unimaginable things, you won't react with fear, as most people do. You'll be equipped, calm, and able to see the truth. My best, Hedy. This is What We Keep Hidden by Lauren Nicole. Chapter 2. The Radio.
You shouldn't have let her go by herself. I knew this would happen. I thought the medication was working. It's been 3 months since her last one. Plus, she's been so great up here, and Lucy was with her. Maybe it was the fumes from the paint. What if she's been doing too much?
My parents' muddled argument in the hallway was coming through the half-open door to my room. I blinked as my eyes adjusted to the light. There was Lucy, curled up at the foot of my bed. As customary, she never left my side during one of my episodes, but was careful not to impede on my space. On my bedside table, I saw a tall glass of water. I reached for it, but in my fuzzy haze, my hand didn't connect to the glass and it tipped over instead. The squish of a splash and leftover drips of water created a rhythmic plink, plink, plink sound. As the glass rolled back and forth on the table, the sound of footsteps in the hall began to quickly make their way towards me. "Hi, sweetie. How are you feeling?" Mrs. Mom said as she picked up the glass and put it right side up. "You sure gave us a fright." Mr. Dad grabbed a shirt on the floor and began mopping up the spilled water, avoiding eye contact. The words in my mind were clear and ready to head down the highway, through my mouth, and into my parents' ears. Somewhere in between my mind and tongue, they slowed down, causing an enormous traffic jam. I looked up at Mrs. Mom. I could feel the wrinkles between my eyebrows furrow as I concentrated on getting the words out. "Oh, I'm fine now, really. There's no need to worry." I think it was a mix of the new route, meeting someone new, the brightness at that time of day, and that darn crinkling cookie wrapper. It was just a little more stress than I could handle. Besides, Lucy took good care of me, like always. But all that came out was, "Okay, bright, crinkle, stress, Lucy, good." I felt a hot tear begin to form along the edge of my eye, a growing pool of my frustration in liquid form. "It's all right. I get it. It was just too much in a short time. This is just a sign that it's time to slow things down a bit." Mrs. Mom took me in her arms and held my head close to her heart. I could hear her heartbeat, which was always so comforting. I closed my eyes as another tear fell on her arm and rolled down her soft, rosy golden skin. As it grew smaller, so did my frustration, and calmness began to return like the coolness of a silky evening breeze that swept over my skin after a hot summer day. It reached the traffic jam of words, and with one swift swoop, detangled the mess and righted the flow. It was a new route. Meeting Audrey. The sun was too bright. Crinkling wrappers, I said in between sniffles. Mrs. Mom kissed my forehead. I thought so. Mr. Dad sat on the edge of the bed with Lucy and gave her some scratches behind her ear. "She helped a lot," I told him. "I believe it. She takes care of you like you're one of hers. Why don't you take it easy today? Stay in bed, read, cuddle with this little piggle." Lucy stretched out her front legs, putting both paws on my ankle and giving me a big smile. Good idea, Mrs. Mom said. If you feel up to it later, you can start settling into your new desk. I know how long you've been wanting to do that. I leaned up and eased myself back onto the propped up pillows. Yeah, that sounds good. And for dinner, we can make pizza. And we'll even watch a Rita Hayworth movie, Mrs. Mom said, glancing between Mr. Dad and me for approval. Cover girl or down to earth? Down to earth, I smiled. Whenever I had one of my medical events, I knew I would be trapped in my room for a few days. Not because my parents are weird or anything, but because my body was. Once my rigid muscles relaxed, the onset of the pain and soreness began. My spine felt like it was turned into shards of glass, making any movement unbearable. My ribs protested the expansion with every shallow breath. By this point, I had a tried and true plan of escape through books and thought experiments. I can't take credit for the thought experiments, though. That was Einstein's. The only difference is he entered his, what do you call it? A thought lab? Whatever. He would enter his thought lab by staring at a candle flame. I entered it out of necessity to leave my body for a bit. A few days after the incident, I felt strong enough to spend some time at my desk. My new room was big enough for a desk that fit all of my tools and projects. Lucy liked to fall asleep under it. Her new favorite place to nap while I was working on my radio. This was no ordinary radio set either. Based on my previous studies, I had figured out the right components to allow this basic set to pick up microwaves. I pulled my radio set towards me and flipped the switch at the back. Aha! I screamed, jumping up with such vigor that I bumped my desk and startled Lucy awake. She stretched, yawned, gave me a swift look of annoyance, then left the room. I assumed she left to look for a more peaceful place in the house to take her nap. What she didn't understand was that any noise coming from the speakers was a positive sign that my invention was working. I know. You're wondering why I'm trying to listen to microwaves? In class, we had been studying the Big Bang Theory, which said that an enormous amount of energy had been emitted during one major explosion. We learned that energy exists as wavelengths. So one type of energy is light, and as humans, we can see it with our eyes. But only the light wavelengths that exist in the visible spectrum. There are so many more wavelengths that we can't even see, like ultraviolet light. We may not be able to see it with our eyes, but we can feel it with a sunburn on our skin. The same happens with energy we can hear, like how we use radio waves to broadcast songs and news over long distances to listeners. We can't see radio waves with our eyes, but we can hear them under the right conditions, like having a radio or any sort of receiver. Hey kiddo, you hungry? I heard Mrs. Mom call from the stairwell. Yeah, be right down, I called without even looking over my shoulder. No. I could hear the gears starting to slow down. Ugh. I flipped the switch and turned the radio off. The loud crackling of the speaker slowly faded as I grabbed my power drill. All right, what is it this time? Wavelengths always reminded me of Lucy. If you think about it, high energy wavelengths are short and bounce up and down rapidly. Kind of like Lucy when she's about to get a treat. Over time, energy starts to decrease, and the originally short wavelengths spread out a bit. Like Lucy at the end of the day when she lays around napping in the afternoon sun. Using that same logic, with the constant expansion of the universe, and the time elapsed from the Big Bang event, those originally short wavelengths have now been stretched into longer ones. We listen to these every day, if you use a radio. Problem: everyone already knows about radios. There's no discovery there. So, change the question. What do other wavelengths sound like? This is where microwaves come in. Microwaves are being used on Earth, sure, but not as widely as radio waves. Plus, these wavelengths are ever present in the cosmos and constantly bombarding Earth. With my modified radio set, I was finally going to hear them. Turning the radio on its belly, I unscrewed the back panel and in my haste knocked over a picture frame. Oops, sorry, Al. The man in the picture with the messy white hair peered back at me with these knowing eyes that suggested he'd understood my frustration. I was so close to perfecting the radio. With palpable impatience, I made quick work of unscrewing the back panel with the power drill. Underneath the plastic casing, a tangle of wires and hardware might look like an incoherent mess to anyone else, but there was a method to my madness, and I knew exactly where to look. With a couple of tweezers, I carefully made my way through the mess and found a blue wire and a purple wire, each with a hook-like curve on their ends. Gotcha! I used the tweezers to hook the wires together again and gave them a quick twist to ensure they wouldn't loosen and fall apart, and tucked the wires back inside the radio, placed the panel over the opening, and before I grabbed the power drill, I picked up the picture frame and set it right side up again. That's better, isn't it? I'm sure he appreciates it. I screamed and dropped my power drill. Sorry, honey, goodness, oh, I thought you heard us coming up the stairs. Mrs. Mom chuckled as she walked over to my desk. You never came down, so I brought you a sandwich and some chips, she explained as she set the plate on the desk and leaned on the edge. Oh, you didn't have to do that, I said as I caught my breath. I was just finishing this and coming right down to eat with you. I picked up the drill and with a few quick buzzes, replaced the panel. That was almost an hour ago, Mrs. Mom said as she inspected the radio. Is this what you've been doing all this time? Has it been that long? Yep. That's why I came to check on you, she said. Lucy nudged the plate towards me with her nose. She's right. You should eat something, Mrs. Mom said as she grabbed a chip off the plate and tossed it towards Lucy. Or else she will. The chip flew through the air in a beautiful arc that caught her attention. As she lifted her head to catch it in her mouth, it hit her right on the bridge of her nose between her eyes. At the sight of Lucy's horrible attempt at catch, Mrs. Mom and I caught the giggles. Lucy blushed and smiled as she dropped the chip, then went searching for it on the floor. She was never good at catch, was she? No, I said as I picked up the sandwich and started eating. In other news, I see Einstein made the cut for the coveted picture frame on the desk. Mm-hmm, I said with a mouthful of food. Tesla needed a break. I see. Mrs. Mom picked up the frame, pulled her sleeve up over her fist, and shined the glass. I'm sure he's happy for the rest. He held up the fort in the apartment for a while. Yeah. Plus I like Einstein's hair in this one. Mrs. Mom nodded in approval before something else caught her attention. I followed her gaze out of the window, where the sun was traveling further down towards the horizon line, past the grove of oak trees at the far end of the property. You don't get sunsets like this in the city, she sighed. Yeah, they're so magical here. The whole world turns pink, I said. The sherbet-colored sky had turned the clouds an almost neon pink that bounced down to the earth below, bathing everything in its path a soft pink glow. I think I'll call it pink time, I added under my breath. You know, photographers already call it the magic hour, right? Mrs. Mom chuckled. They can call it whatever they like. I like pink time, I stubbornly insisted. Fair enough, she smiled as she tousled my hair. Well, I think you've been cooped up in your room long enough. Why don't you and Lucy go with me to the market for lunch tomorrow? Mrs. Mom suggested. If that goes well, You and Lucy can try going out and exploring the yard after. You mean in the out? I asked. Yes, in the out. You don't have to go too far. Just stay in the backyard. This might be our forever home. Might as well get to know it inside and out. All right. The word trailed off with my insecurities. Take Lucy with you and stay close. You'll be fine. Your dad and I will be right here in case anything happens. Who knows? You might have a fun adventure. Thank you for joining us on this episode of What We Keep Hidden. Written, narrated, and produced by Lauren Nicole. Tune in next time to see what happens with Hedy and Lucy. This has been a Lauren Nicole creation.